And I just want to say for the record, LeBron James is full of it. And in this particular instance, as it pertains to his son, he is a liar.
Stephen A. Smith is back in the spotlight, and now he's taking shots at Bronny James. After going head-to-head with LeBron, he's hinting that Bronny's financial future might not be as secure as people think. In this video, I'll break down what Stephen A. said and what this could mean for Bronny's future. The truth behind the bankruptcy. Now, I know what you're thinking. How did Bronny James go bankrupt with his blossoming career? Well, Stephen A. Smith just dropped the bombshell. But to understand how we got here, we need to rewind to where the real controversy began. Because this wasn't about money at first. It was about family, pressure, and one of the most explosive confrontations in recent sports media history. The real drama started brewing on January 28, 2025, when Stephen A. Smith delivered what would become one of his most controversial takes on First Take.
I am pleading with LeBron James, stop this. Stop this. We all know that Bronny James is in the NBA because of his dad.
This wasn't just another hot take. This was Stephen A. going full throttle on what he saw as a father putting his son in an impossible position. Now here's where things get really interesting. Stephen A. wasn't just throwing around random criticism. He was looking at Bronny's NBA statistics. 76 minutes over 18 appearances with 25 points and 25.8% shooting, and comparing them to his G League performance of 13.4 points, 3.4 rebounds, and 3.9 assists over 7 games. The numbers told a story that made Stephen A. uncomfortable, not as a basketball analyst, but as someone who understood the pressure that comes with being LeBron James's son.
Bronny James has played in 13 NBA games. Ladies and gentlemen, he's averaging 0.3 points, 0.3 assists, and 0.4 rebounds. And he's playing in the first quarter of an NBA game? Really?
But Stephen A.'s criticism went deeper than just numbers on a stat sheet. He was drawing parallels to one of boxing's most controversial moments, when Joe Frazier put his son Marvis in the ring against heavyweight champion Larry Holmes. It was a comparison that would prove to be prophetic in terms of the backlash he would face. What made this situation even more explosive was the context. This wasn't just any 55th draft pick struggling in the NBA. This was LeBron James' son, playing alongside his father in what was being marketed as a historic moment. The pressure was immense, the expectations were sky high, and Stephen A. Smith was essentially saying what many people in NBA circles were thinking, but were afraid to say out loud. The timing couldn't have been worse for LeBron and Bronny. LeBron had previously made statements like, "If you want me, draft Bronny," in February 2022, and had said in March 2023 that Bronny definitely better than some of these cats. These statements had created a narrative that Stephen A. felt was putting unfair pressure on a young player who was still developing. But here's where Stephen A.'s approach becomes really interesting and controversial. He wasn't just criticizing Bronny's play. He was making this about LeBron's decision-making as a father, and that's where things got personal.
To see a father on the court with his son who has NBA aspirations playing together for the first time in NBA history. My position has always been that should have been the only moment we saw Bronny James in a Lakers uniform this season. Because he's not ready.
This wasn't Stephen A. being cruel or trying to destroy a young man's career. In his mind, he was being protected. He was looking at a situation where a 20-year-old was averaging 2.3 points, 0.8 assists, and 0.7 rebounds in 6.7 minutes per game, and wondering why someone with LeBron's basketball IQ would put his son in such a difficult position. The criticism intensified when Stephen A. started questioning LeBron's role in creating this situation. He pointed out that LeBron's public statements about wanting to play with his son had essentially forced the Lakers' hand, creating a scenario where Bronny would be judged not just as a basketball player, but as the son of one of the greatest players in NBA history.
Because LeBron is the basketball savant. LeBron is one of the top 2 greatest players in the history of the game. LeBron has forgotten more basketball than most people would know. So no matter what we think about Bronny, he knows more.
What many people didn't realize at the time was that Stephen A. had actually been protecting Bronny for years. He revealed that he had deliberately avoided watching Bronny play in high school and college because he didn't want to be put in a position where he would have to critique LeBron's son.
When Bronny James was in high school, I never went to see him play on purpose. And when I spoke about it on the air, I said, the kid, from what I'm being told, has potential. But we all know how great his father is.
The irony of the situation was palpable. Here was Stephen A. Smith, who had spent years trying to avoid criticizing Bronny James, finally speaking up because he felt the situation had become untenable. Stephen A. Smith's criticism wasn't really about Bronny. It was about LeBron's handling of the situation. But LeBron James saw it differently, very differently. And on March 6th, 2025, during a Lakers game against the New York Knicks at Crypto.com Arena, all of that tension would explode in one of the most dramatic confrontations in recent sports sports media history. The Explosive Confrontation and LeBron's shocking admission. Stephen A. Smith was sitting courtside, not as a regular attendee, but as a guest of Ari Emanuel from William Morris Endeavor, alongside comedy legend Larry David. The Lakers were playing the New York Knicks. The game was being broadcast nationally, and tensions were already high because of Stephen A.'s recent comments about Bronny. Then, during the third quarter, right out of a timeout, something unprecedented happened in sports media. LeBron James, one of the most composed and media-savvy athletes in the world, completely lost his cool and approached Stephen A. with an intensity that shocked everyone present.
LeBron James rolled over on me and basically started speaking to me, getting in my face about stop effing with my son. That's my effing son. Stop effing with my son. And that was about the size of it. He didn't give me much of a chance to speak, to respond.
This wasn't just a basketball player upset about criticism. This was a father protecting his son, and Stephen A. recognized it immediately. But it also highlighted the fundamental miscommunication that had been building between them.
He was very, very upset. That wasn't a basketball player confronting me. That was a parent. That was a father.
Now, you have to understand the context here. This wasn't just any random game. It was on the same day that news had broken about Stephen A. Smith's massive contract extension with ESPN. Stephen A. was already in the spotlight, and now he found himself in the middle of a confrontation that would dominate sports headlines for weeks. But here's what made this confrontation so unique: Stephen A. Smith's response. Instead of escalating the situation or making a scene, he chose restraint. And his reasoning for this restraint reveals something crucial about both his character and his understanding of the situation.
If the environment was conducive to that, not in the middle of a game, standing on the sideline, where my only recourse would be to make a scene by retaliating, I was not going to do that, ladies and gentlemen.
But what happened after this confrontation is where our story takes a dramatic turn, because LeBron James, in trying to explain his actions, would inadvertently reveal something that completely changed the narrative of their entire feud. The revelation came during a conversation between LeBron and Richard Jefferson before a Lakers game against the Boston Celtics. Richard Jefferson, who won a championship with LeBron in Cleveland and now works for ESPN and ABC, was having what seemed like a casual conversation with his former teammate. But that conversation would expose the real reason behind LeBron's anger.
LeBron James with Richard Jefferson. You saw the video. So when he sat up there and said, when I'm talking as a dad, right? That's the only thing. That's the only thing I'm tripping. I don't give a F. Once he talks about you I plead as a father, I can't.
This was the moment that everything clicked for Stephen A. Smith. LeBron's anger wasn't really about protecting Bronny from criticism. It was about Stephen A.'s comments regarding LeBron's decision-making as a father. The confrontation suddenly made sense in a completely different way.
So it wasn't about Bronny. It was about him.
This revelation was massive because it confirmed what Stephen A. had been saying all along. His criticism had never been directed at Bronny James personally. It had been about LeBron's role in creating an impossible situation for his son, but the drama was far from over. LeBron James would take his grievances public in a big way, appearing on the Pat McAfee show on March 26, 2025, where he would make comments that would send Stephen A. Smith into full attack mode.
He's like on a Taylor Swift tour run right now.
LeBron's Taylor Swift tour run comment was his way of saying that Stephen A. was milking the controversy for all it was worth, using their confrontation to generate content and attention. It was a direct shot at Stephen A.'s integrity as a journalist and commentator. But if LeBron thought Stephen A. would back down, he was about to learn otherwise. Stephen A.'s response would be swift, brutal, and would escalate their feud to an entirely new level.
And I just want to say for the record, LeBron James is full of it. And in this particular instance, as it pertains to his son, he is a liar. And he went on national television today and he lied again.
This was Stephen A. Smith declaring war. He wasn't just defending his position anymore. He was going on the offensive, calling LeBron James a liar on national television. The gloves were officially off. But Stephen A. didn't stop there. He would go on to make one of the most shocking statements in the entire controversy, referencing the infamous Will Smith-Chris Rock Oscar incident and making it clear that he wouldn't have backed down if the confrontation had turned physical.
You want me to act, you want this to be a reincarnation of Chris Rock and Will Smith? I would have gotten my ass kicked, because had that man put his hands on me, I would have immediately swung on him. Immediately. That I'm not gonna tolerate.
This statement sent shockwaves through that sports media world. Stephen A. Smith, one of the most recognizable faces in sports journalism, was essentially saying he would have fought LeBron James if their confrontation had turned physical. But beyond the drama and the heated exchanges, Stephen A. was making a deeper point about his relationship with NBA players and the challenges he faces as a black commentator in sports media. He felt that his criticism was being unfairly characterized as hating on the brothers, and he was fed up with that narrative.
I'm not just a black man, I'm a brother. I'm not gonna take this shit from people anymore.
This brings us to a crucial aspect of this entire controversy that often gets overlooked. Stephen A. Smith's frustration wasn't just about LeBron and Bronny. It was about a broader pattern he was seeing among some NBA players who, in his view, were trying to discredit him by suggesting he was somehow betraying the black community through his criticism. Stephen A. laid out his credentials in this regard, reminding everyone of his work as the ambassador for HBCU Week that has generated millions in scholarship dollars, his role in helping diversify ESPN through his work as executive producer of First Take, and his 30 years in the business where he has had access to information that could be damaging to many players, but has chosen to focus on the game rather than personal attacks. The most revealing moment in Stephen A.'s defense came when he pointed out the fundamental unfairness of how his criticism was being characterized. He noted that he consistently praised LeBron James, calling him the second best player in NBA history, a great father, husband, actor, businessman, philanthropist, and producer. Yet somehow, any criticism of LeBron's game or decision-making was being twisted into something personal or racially motivated.
I think LeBron James is the greatest player in the history of man outside of Michael Jordan. I don't have him as number one. What haven't I said? Four-time champion, four-time league MVP, all-time leading scorer in NBA history right now, surefire first ballot Hall of Famer. What have I not said?
This pattern of criticism being mischaracterized as hate was something Stephen A. had dealt with throughout his career, but the LeBron-Bronny situation had brought it to a boiling point. He was being accused of selling out and not being down with the black community, simply for doing his job as a sports commentator. Stephen A. Smith wasn't some media personality looking to attack LeBron's family for ratings. He was someone who had gone out of his way for years to protect the James family from the kind of scrutiny that his coverage could bring. Even when Kendrick Perkins questioned Bronny's McDonald's All-American status, Stephen A. didn't join the criticism. When reports emerged that teams like Golden State, Phoenix, the Clippers, and Boston were interested in drafting Bronny, but were dissuaded because LeBron and Rich Paul had made it clear he was going to be a Laker, Stephen A. stayed quiet. It was only when Bronny was actually in the NBA, struggling with his limited playing time and poor statistics, that Stephen A. felt compelled to speak up. And even then, his criticism was directed at LeBron's handling of the situation, not at Bronny personally. The fan reaction to this entire controversy has been fascinating and divided. Opinions have been split between those who support Stephen A.'s right to critique performance and those who see his comments as too harsh or personal. Some fans appreciate LeBron for defending his son, while others criticize him for handling the situation publicly rather than privately. The debate has also touched on broader issues of nepotism in professional sports. Fans have compared Bronny's situation to other cases, such as Giannis Antetokounmpo's brothers being signed to G League contracts, but note that Bronny faces more scrutiny due to LeBron's status and the public nature of their father-son NBA journey. Stephen A.'s track record with NBA stars. To understand Stephen A. Smith's influence and approach, we need to look at his track record with other NBA stars who have faced his criticism. Let's start with some of the most notable cases where Stephen A. has been critical of NBA players, beginning with situations that mirror some aspects of the Bronny controversy. Zach Randolph provides a perfect example of how Stephen A.'s criticism plays out in the real world. In August 2017, Randolph was arrested for felony marijuana possession, an incident that Stephen A. criticized in line with his stance against recreational marijuana use among athletes. The arrest was serious. It occurred near Los Angeles' Nickerson Gardens housing project and involved a chaotic scene with police vehicles being damaged. At the time, Randolph had just signed a 2-year, $24 million contract with the Sacramento Kings. Stephen A.'s criticism was swift and pointed, but here's what's interesting about the actual impact. Randolph continued to play effectively, appearing in 59 games in the 2017-18 season and averaging 14.5 points and 6.7 rebounds per game. J.R. Smith represents one of Stephen A.'s most memorable criticisms, and it came during one of the biggest moments in NBA history. Smith faced significant criticism from Stephen A. after his mistake in Game 1 of the 2018 NBA Finals, where he dribbled out the clock instead of shooting or calling a timeout when the score was tied, leading to overtime and a Warriors victory. Stephen A. called it a boneheaded mistake, and the moment became one of the most memeable moments in NBA history. Kevin Durant provides the most ongoing and complex example of Stephen A.'s relationship with a superstar player. Stephen A. has criticized Durant Durant on multiple occasions, most notably for his decision to join the Golden State Warriors in 2016, which Stephen A. called the weakest move he had seen from a superstar. More recently, Stephen A. has questioned Durant's leadership with the Phoenix Suns and later the Houston Rockets. It didn't end there. In 2024, Durant called Stephen A. a clown, and their feud doesn't seem to be ending soon. Zion Williamson is another star who has faced Stephen A.'s criticisms. In early 2025, the New Orleans Pelicans shut down Zion for the rest of the season after a bone injury, and Stephen A. had this to say: "I feel very, very bad for the Pelicans and the city of New Orleans. Zion Williamson is a star caliber talent. When he's on the court and healthy, he's a monster. The problem is, he's rarely available." He went on to label Zion a bust, not because he lacks talent, but because he's rarely available. Russell Westbrook has also been criticized by Stephen A. for years. In 2021, Stephen called out Russell for not winning a championship title despite his stats and history. He went on to say that Russell never developed a consistent three-point shot and hinted that it's the reason why he's never won an NBA title. Russell and his wife responded to Stephen A., calling the attacks personal and disrespectful. In a long and well-thought-out response, Russell said, "A championship don't change my life. I'm happy. I was a champion once I made it to the NBA. I grew up in the streets. I'm a champion." Stephen A.'s pattern of criticisms becomes even more interesting when we look at the players he has praised throughout his career. His praise often focuses on historical significance and exceptional achievements. Michael Jordan stands at the top of Stephen A.'s praise list. In his 2022 ranking of the greatest NBA players, Stephen A. named Jordan as the GOAT, emphasizing his dominance during the Chicago Bulls' success in the 1990s and his numerous MVP awards and championships. Stephen A. has stated unequivocally, "Don't tell me that LeBron James at his best eclipsed Michael Jordan at his best. I'm not trying to hear it." LeBron James presents a fascinating paradox in Stephen A.'s commentary. Despite their recent feud over Bronny, Stephen A. has consistently praised LeBron as one of the greatest players in NBA history, placing him at number 2 in his all-time rankings. He has highlighted LeBron's 4 NBA titles, his status as the all-time leading scorer, and his dominance across multiple decades. Even during their current feud, Stephen A. has maintained his praise for LeBron's basketball accomplishments while criticizing his handling of the Bronny situation. This nuanced approach shows that Stephen A. can separate personal disagreements from professional assessment. Austin Reeves represents Stephen A.'s most recent high-profile praise of an active player. In March 2025, Stephen A. called Reeves a special talent and potentially the best third option in the NBA. He said, "You can make a legitimate argument right now that Austin Reeves is the best third option in the entire NBA. The way he is balling, this brother can play now. Austin Reeves is a special talent, and he's getting better and better every day." This praise came after Reeves' impressive performances, including a 30-point game against the San Antonio Spurs. While Stephen A.'s comments likely boosted Reeves' public profile, Reeves was already in the third year of a 4-year, $53.8 million contract and performing well on the court. What emerges from this comprehensive look at Stephen A.'s relationships with NBA players is a clear pattern. His commentary, whether positive or negative, serves more as a reflection of player performance and circumstances. This brings us back to the Bronny James situation and why it became so explosive. The controversy is all about family expectations and the unique pressures that come with being the son of one of the greatest players in NBA history. The fan reactions to the entire Stephen A. Bronny LeBron controversy have been diverse and passionate. Some fans support Stephen A.'s right to critique performance, viewing his comments as fair analysis given Bronny's limited NBA statistics. Others feel Stephen A. crossed a line by making it about LeBron's parenting, viewing it as too personal for sports commentary. Stephen A. has built his career on being willing to say what others won't, whether that's criticizing superstars for poor performances or calling out front offices for bad decisions. His approach has made him one of the most recognizable figures in sports media, but it has also put him in numerous conflicts with players throughout his career. The Bronny James situation will likely be remembered for what it revealed about the pressures facing young athletes with famous parents and the challenges of navigating family dynamics in the public eye. Bronny continues to develop his skills, splitting time between the Lakers and their G League affiliate, working to earn his place in the NBA based on his own merit. LeBron and Stephen A. have both moved on from their confrontation, with LeBron focusing on his continuing NBA career and Stephen A. continuing to provide commentary across multiple sports. The basketball world has returned to focusing on games, playoffs, and the eternal debates about greatness that make the sport so compelling. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.